light without dark. I am a part of you all. You can never defeat me. We are brothers eternal.
You're listening to 91 Reasons, a journey into the twisted landscape of pop culture. Keep your hands and arms inside the podcast at all times. And now, The Voice, Jeff Tucker.
People I know, places I go, make me feel tongue-tied. And I can see how people look down there on the inside. Here's where the story ends.
I was at a friend's house. I don't know what, maybe a year ago, and they're really fun, nice people. We hang out all the time, and it's a couple, and the guy says, "Hey, I got a movie prop I want to show you." I was like, "Oh, hey, I love movie props. Oh my God, that's my thing, man. Movie props to me have weight and history, and you look at them and they make you happy because, that's the prop. When we go to Comic-Con, and we're going to Comic-Con tomorrow, there's always the prop store that has an amazing collection of amazing props. And every time I go there, it's like, oh my God, because there's something about the weight. I know I use that word. It's the weight that an object takes on when it's suddenly like that's the object in the movie, or the costume in the movie, or the model that made that impression on you. I've seen props from, hundreds, thousands of movies over the years going to conventions. I've touched and held props. There's only a few that really affect you. I've not seen a lot of props from Back to the Future. The hoverboards always show up, and as great as those are, like a lot of the stuff like the Brainwave Analyzer or the DeLorean model, like that's all at ILM. So that's never going to fall into collectors' hands. And a lot of the stuff is from 2 and 3 that made it to collectors' hands. So, and I know that, some of the costumes from Back to the Future are there, but, some of the only stuff that's really affected me looking at it, I've said before, was Gene Wilder's coat from Profiles in History. They had Gene Wilder's coat from the first Willy Wonka movie, and I was just like, I was weeping. Like that coat just means everything to me. There are a few props. Now, I'm not saying that the one I'm going to talk about it really affected me like that, but it was truly like, I didn't know what he was going to bring out of the room. I didn't know, had no concept of what prop he was going to bring. It could have been anything. And so he goes in the bedroom and he comes out and he hands me, and it looks like a long brown seashell. It doesn't look like anything unless you know what it is. And he looked at me and he was very proud that he had it. And I was in awe for like, I knew what it was. He's like, I bet you don't know what that was. And I'm like, this is not fair. Like, I know a lot of props. And I said, this looks like the unicorn horn from Legend. And he said, well, that's the unicorn horn from Legend. And I was like, it's weird because when things have that kind of pedigree, in an instant they go from being something interesting you're holding to, like, your hand drops, like the weight suddenly, boom, it adds to the object. And I could feel like a physical increase in its mass, even though nothing changed. Like, oh my God, let me hand this back to you. He's like, yeah, I worked on the movie. And I was like, you worked on Legend? And this is the unicorn horn? This is the MacGuffin in the whole movie? Oh my God. Now, obviously they must have had a few of them for the film, but it doesn't matter. It's one of them, and that's all that counts. So I was just like, oh my God, and for nerds, now for movie aficionados, the end all be all is the ruby slippers. For us nerds, we have different levels of geekiness. real lightsabers, right? Hoverboards, right? That kind of stuff. And way up there would be like items like the unicorn horn from Legend, because it's just, there's so much history there. I mean, that's okay. So I held the horn in my hand and found out that he worked on it. I grilled him with a lot of questions, and he was kind enough to answer them. And then a year later, I've got a podcast, and I solicited on my Patreon page for, hey, if you want to donate to the show, that's great. And if you donate a certain amount, you can pick the movie to review. So naturally, his wife was kind enough and generous enough to donate, and I'm very humbled by anybody taking an interest in this show and wanting to participate, and I couldn't be prouder that we have Patreon pledgers who are willing to do that. And without hesitation, I mean, she's a huge Back to the Future fan. Monique loves she lives and breathes it like I do. But I've already done Back to the Future. So she picked the next best thing, which is the movie that her husband worked on, Tim, Legend. So I had to go back and rewatch it. So it's weird. Every once in a while, like when you think back to the 80s, all these movies pop up in your head, Back to the Future, Goonies, Tron, Return of the Jedi, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Batman, Raiders of the Lost Ark, E.T. There are so many iconic, defining movies of the 80s. And if I were to say, name a sword and sorcery film from the 80s, for me, the top of the list is Labyrinth, because it was a Lucasfilm production, and I'm a Lucasfilm weirdo, and it was a Henson production, and I'm a Henson weirdo. It's got Bowie, and I'm a Bowie weirdo. It's got Jennifer Connelly, and I'm a Jennifer Connelly weirdo. Thankfully, the restraining order keeps me at a distance, but that would be the top. But there were a handful of really solid sword and sorcery films that came out in the 80s that are so special because each one contains mostly handcrafted effects. Everything lovingly done by hand. Paintings, puppets, models, intricate and amazing solutions to film problems. Labyrinth would be one of the first to feature computer-generated effects. The owl in the credits is computer, and I was, I saw it in the theater. I was blown away by it. And when you look down the roster of sword and sorcery films, Conan the Barbarian, Lady Hawk, Dragon Slayer, there are some really solid films in there, and most of them are fondly remembered. They have mega deluxe DVDs and Blu-rays. Now, Legend has all of that, but Legend is a cult movie. It's a cult movie even cultier than Labyrinth, because here's a movie that came out, it did not make an impression, and it went away very quickly, which is, really a shame. It's really a shame, because I remember watching Legend with, my friend Eric and Larry and Toby hanging out, watching it on VHS, and like, hey, we didn't see this in theaters. What is this, man? Oh, it's got Tim Curry in it. Oh, put it on. Now, there was a little bit of a backlash as far as my friends were concerned, because immediately after Legend hits theaters, Tom Cruise has the biggest hit of his career with Top Gun, and he becomes a Tiger Beat poster child, and all of us regular guys are left like, nah, we're not Tom Cruise fans. And that's too bad, because Tom Cruise has always, in his career, for the most part, picked really solid scripts. Tom Cruise doesn't put his name on a project. Once he got clout after, Risky Business, he didn't put his name on anything that he didn't feel was quality. Now, there was some schlock in there. Cocktail, Days of Thunder, movies that didn't quite click. But he always worked with top-notch directors on films that are really well done, very well crafted cinema experiences. And Legend is way at the top of the Tom Cruise filmography as far as I'm concerned, which is a shame, because it really is, for the most part, outside of nerd circles that I travel in. You ask somebody, hey, name a Tom Cruise movie where he has a sword. They won't have any idea what you're talking about. No clue. And Legend just, for whatever reason, didn't click with audiences. I think, now, Labyrinth, for its part, there was a few tie-ins. There was some candy items. There was Sir Didymus plush. There was a little bit of merchandise. Now, Legend had zero merchandise, which is too bad. But I think, they have something every year called the Merchandising Licensing Expo, where people show off what movies are coming up in the next year or two, and everybody signs on to make product. And I think if they had shown Legend clips at that kind of show, nobody would have bought on back in 85, 84 when they were in the midst of making this thing, simply because it's quite an adult movie. It appeals to children because of the fantasy elements. There's a fairy in it. There are goblins and trolls, but the storyline of it and the mere presence alone of Tim Curry really excludes a lot of kids because A, it's too adult, and B, it's way too freaking scary. So I put it on the other day, thanks to my friend Hindle and his amazing digital collection. He's able to dig up movies, boom, at a moment's notice. Because you know what? I did make the run trying to buy this on Blu-ray. They didn't have it at 3 or 4 Targets. They didn't have it at Best Buy. And you know what? Physically going into stores and buying discs, I think that's almost dead. You know, you got to go to eBay to buy a disc. You got to go to Amazon to buy a disc. And then they're going to tell you, it's better to buy the download. And I'm old. I want to own a disc. Physical disc. I'm the last generation that's going to have collections like I do of actual physical movies. Everybody else, it's going to be in the cloud, hovering above us in a million pieces like Mike TV. So I watched Legend over a couple of nights and really studied it. Now, this was the movie that Ridley Scott decided to make after, now he worked on the failed mega budget Dune in the 70s, and that didn't pan out. So he made Alien. Then he made Blade Runner, and he watched the studio butcher Blade Runner to death, and that's a story for another episode or two. So he threw himself into this film after that and spent 2 or 3 years researching fairy tales and fables, and instead of adapting one of those, decided to come up with his own. Now, this is many years before Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings trilogy would really open up sword and sorcery, thanks to Weta and digital effects and the advances that they made. But Legends made, like I said, by hand, physical sets, amazing physical sets, done in London. They did some work in an actual park, and much like Blade Runner. Now, Blade Runner, once Blade Runner came out, that was the vision of the future that everybody latched onto. Now, they didn't know it, but most of the sword and sorcery movies made after Legend borrow heavily from Legend's imagery. And that's because Ridley Scott's just got the eye, man. This guy knows how to shoot. He knows how to create mood and atmosphere. And where Blade Runner's atmosphere was smoke and steam and neon, Legend's atmosphere is organic and green and flowers, but it also has a lot of these things floating through every scene. And I don't know what they are. There's some sort of dandelion or something floating in it must have been murder to film. The minute you go, and cue, floral, and somebody starts throwing this stuff into the fan to blow across the screen. But that image, I don't know if anybody did that before Ridley. I'm not, I've seen Excalibur and a lot of the sword and sorcery movies or Elizabethan medieval films. I can't remember, and I'm sure if somebody knows it, they can correct me. If anybody did that prior to Legend, or if they did, they didn't do it to the extent that Legend does, because that stuff floats across the screen, and it's like a precursor to like Avatar. And if Legend had been made in 3D, everybody in the theater would have been pawing at the sky trying to get that stuff out of the way. But it truly does set Legend in its own time frame. Like, we get it. There's this stuff floating in the air. It's beautiful. We meet Sara in her film debut, which is weird because Legend was in production so long that Sara had Ferris Bueller come out right on top of it, you know? And she's more known for Ferris Bueller. I mean, that's an iconic 80s movie. More than anything else she did, she is known as Sloane in Ferris Bueller. But her princess character in Legend, who is, you know, I think she had just turned 16 when she filmed it. She's very young, very impressionable, very, very beautiful. That and Labyrinth share a lot in common, and they share a lot of the common themes, because Labyrinth and Legend both are about young girls on the cusp of being women, and what choices are they going to make as they move into adulthood. And that's a recurring theme of a lot of fairy tales. Fairy tales are about boys becoming men / heroes, and girls becoming women. That's just the way it is. Princesses have to find their prince and ascend to the throne. That's life. That's what every important story has been about. The hero's journey, the heroine's journey. So we meet Sara's character, and she's the other thing about Legend is that it's a 2 solid hour movie, and yet there are so many things that are left up to the viewer to decide. We're just getting the Cliff's Notes of this world. It's too bad Legend didn't make 50, 60 million at the box office in 86, because we might have got a sequel. Now, during filming, they had the unfortunate disaster of all the sets burning down. So that adds way to the budget. And it's unfortunate because, again, it sets up such a distinct, singular world that it would have been interesting to see what Ridley Scott would have done with a sequel. But, alas, it's not to be. It's simply not to be. But we meet her character, and she's impetuous, and you never see the castle she's from. You never see her family, which is some sort of royalty because she's the princess. We never see any of that. It's just in the dialogue to get the story moving. And we see her, she's, what's the word I'm looking for? She's, she just goes and she has quick moment decisions that she doesn't think about. She's very impulsive. And we see her like sampling food in a house that's not hers. She loves to hang with the lower rung people, the regular people of the whatever land this is. She's not in the castle waiting for whatever to arrive. She's out and about. And that's when we meet the hero of the story. We meet Jack, played by Tom Cruise. It's interesting to note that it's the only movie we've ever seen Tom Cruise with his natural long hair. He's lately always have short, cropped, manageable hair or fake wigs like in Born on the 4th of July. But for this one, it's his real hair. He's very young in it. He's willing to try new things. And it does show that whether you like or hate Tom Cruise for his personal weirdness, it is hard to deny that the guy can really act. Because in this film, he's naive, he's impressionable, he's in love with the princess, and he's willing to risk certain things to impress her. Because, that's what boys do. We could talk all you want about how the gender roles are changing in society now, but in all the stories that have been passed down for hundreds of years, boys have to go out of their way to impress young girls. That's just the way it's been. And you can change it all you want, but the stories that matter. I'll go to Lion King because that seems to be the current one for most generations. Where does Simba immediately tell Nala he's going to take her out to the boneyard, the graveyard? Well, we're not allowed there. That's why it's cool to go there. So in Legend, the equivalent of that is Jack takes Lily out to go see the unicorns, the rarest creatures on Earth. Now, what he doesn't know is that we've seen glimpses of the Lord of Darkness, or the Lord Darkness. We never see him yet. We've not seen who he is. We only hear his voice. But he has sent out this goblin patrol because he's somehow aware that the unicorns are going to be in danger soon. So when Jack shows Lily the unicorns, now this is, again, it's all metaphor. Ridley Scott's script is nothing but metaphors for growing up, temptation, puberty, sex, love. It's all in there. And the unicorns represent the apple on the tree of knowledge. You're not supposed to touch it. And Jack tells her that. And what does she do? She is tempted by it. And she does the unthinkable and touches a unicorn, which makes them vulnerable. And that's when the goblins attack, and then they chop the horn right off. And that's the horn that I held in my hand. And I talk about having the most powerful object in the world, right? But what happens is Lily tells Jack she will marry the man who brings her back this ring, and she throws it in the water. Now, she's only doing this so that Jack will be out of the picture while she touches the unicorn. She's a calculating little girl. So Jack dives, and while he's underwater trying to find the ring, she touches the unicorn and sets in motion the darkening of the world. And the first thing that happens is, in an instant, the whole world is covered in ice. She has plunged the world into darkness. The untouchable creatures have been touched, and the tree of knowledge, and this is the expulsion from Eden. This beautiful paradise that we were allowed to reside in is now taken away from us. And when Jack tries to, now he doesn't find the ring, but when he tries to surface, he finds that the pond is frozen over and he has to break through. So the hero's journey has begun. And, like all hero's journeys, he will be joined by a wizened character and comic relief sidekick characters. Now we get those in the form of an actor who plays a character called the Gump. Now, he's not old looking, but he's old and wise because he's older than the rest of them, even though he's playing against type. And that's Ridley Scott's script trying to subvert our expectations, because we're expecting Obi-Wan Kenobi, and instead we get someone decidedly younger. Now, because this film is made long before Lord of the Rings will hit the screen, they're able to borrow liberally from that and a lot of other fantasy movies. And the way that Jack gets the Gump's trust is by solving a riddle, the same way that Bilbo tricks Gollum into getting the ring through riddles. I'm a huge fan of the movies, but I'm actually more of a fan of the animated Hobbit. That's what I grew up on. And that Gollum. Now, there's nothing against the new ones. I think they're great too, and I went and saw all of them in the theater. So, but you see where they borrow liberally from it. He's also got a fairy character, which is derivative of Peter Pan, and there's this comic sidekick characters played ably again, as always, by Billy Barty. I'm not sure who the other guy is. Doesn't matter. But I just imagine watching it like Billy Barty would don nearly the same identical makeup in Masters of the Universe as Gwildor, or in Willow. This guy just had the cottage industry in the 80s of any time there was a little person role that required heavy makeup, Billy Barty's your guy. And you know what? No offense, he played every one of them beautifully. This is just what this guy was destined to become. So Lily is taken by the goblins to darkness himself, along with the second unicorn, and we find out that the clock is ticking because the sun will go down tonight for the last time. And once the sun goes down, the world will be plunged into darkness, the second unicorn's horn will be harvested, and the world will suddenly become the realm of evil. It's the same type of evilness from The Fifth Element. The bad guy's got a plan, and the goblins roll around and use the horn as a like a magic wand. He's able to make things happen with it. So you're getting this sense that there's a lot of power in this thing. And why? I mean, other than the fact that the character of darkness wants to just destroy anything beautiful. But, so with all these events set in motion, it's up to the characters to take their journeys. Jack must don literally hero's armor. He must get weaponry, and he must go and face the ultimate evil in the form of darkness. And then Lily's journey is a more personal one, because she's out of the picture for a while, because Jack has to round up all these things and become, better than he was. He has to grow the heck up. And when we finally get back to Lily, Lily's character is she's in hell. It's the most interesting, realistic, I mean, if you can use that word realistic, the most interesting and realistic representation of hell I've ever seen, because it's not a terrible place, even though to be there is terrible. Every moment Lily is in the underworld, we are terrified for her. She is tempted at every turn with delicious food and jewels and treasures, and more importantly, she's tempted with sex, and that's the ultimate temptation for a young girl, because once she has sex, she can't go back to being a little girl. She is an adult, and the damage is done according to legends, right? Her virtue is gone, and Jack will no longer love her. It's all wrapped up in virginity and chastity and the rights of womanhood and adulthood. And it's all wrapped up in, once again, much like Beauty and the Beast, this creature that's going to tempt her. And we shouldn't be attracted to darkness. He represents everything evil. He is the devil. But when Tim Curry emerges from the shadows in this movie, it is a truly beautiful and iconic, and dare I say, the best representation of the devil I have ever seen in a movie. First off, it's Tim Curry at the top of his game, chewing scenery like nothing you've ever seen. And second, it's Rob Bottin, and Rob Bottin's design for darkness trumps anybody else's. They must have went to Rob Bottin. Now, this is the guy who did RoboCop. He would do RoboCop. This is the guy who did The Thing. Like, he's top-notch practical effects, makeup, and full-suited characters. He did all the work in this. He does a witch in it named Meg Mucklebones, played by, of all people, Robert Picardo. That's just at once the most grotesque witch you've ever seen and the most beautiful, disgusting witch you've ever seen in a movie. And the only problem is that her scene's way too brief in it. But they must have gone to him and said, we want the most iconic visual representation of the devil ever seen on a film. And that's what he delivered. It must have taken days to get Tim Curry into this costume. Cloven-footed, red, fully encased, the torso, the face, the ears, and obviously the iconic black horns that go out 3 feet that were murder on Curry's back. And he must have been agony every moment in that costume. But you know what? Worth every second of it. Because the minute he shows up on screen, everything goes out the window plot-wise, because he's so alluring and so attractive in it. Like, you're looking at Jack's character, this weak little forest guy, and you're like, Lily, are you crazy? This is the devil himself offering you the kingdom of hell and the kingdom of earth if you will go with him. And he just keeps saying, I just want you here, to talk with me. And what young girl wouldn't just, because, this is a guy who has more power than she's ever witnessed. He's handsome. He's got strength. He's got everything except the fact that he's pure, satanic evil. Right? So the stage is set for the ultimate battle of good versus evil. And I mean, this is what every fairy tale leads up to. The plucky hero has to escape the prisons of hell, the kitchens of the underworld, to come up with a plan to take this guy out. And the plan that they come up with is great because it involves using all of the pots and pans and shields and armory that the devil has taken from every corner of civilization and positioning them to get the last rays of sunshine and bounce it around so that it attacks him down in his lair. And it's a beautifully executed plan. You know exactly where everybody is in relation to the battle. You know, it's Ridley Scott. It's not Michael Bay. It's not McG. It's not heavy editing. It's all designed to keep you in the loop, which is, you know, what I grew up on and what, as a filmmaker, is the best way. I mean, just let the audience, let the film breathe, let the audience in on the geography of the situation. So what happens is everybody's set to do their part, but the wrinkle in it is it looks as if Lily gives in to darkness. And we see it in a physical, oh, this scene is so beautiful. You know, we see a dress dancing by itself. And in a metaphor for seduction and in a metaphor for enticement, we see Lily watch the dress curiously, wondering what it is, and then slowly but surely giving into it and allowing the dress and adulthood to wash over her. And she suddenly is going from a bystander to dancing with the dress to a transformation, and she's in the dress. And, you know, as weird as I was growing up, the white-dressed virginal princesses did nothing for me. You know, I've talked about Lydia Dietz in Beetlejuice, like, oh my God, the first goth-looking character in a movie. And when Lily, this movie predates Beetlejuice. So when Lily puts on the dress and Mia Sara becomes basically the goddess of Hot Topic, like you totally get it. Like, okay, this is a much better choice than wimpy little Jack. She's the devil's concubine. I mean, it's an amazing sequence, that dress dancing sequence, and just done so beautifully on film. You know, if they did it now, it would be CGI, it would look phony, but instead, they just put somebody in like a black unitard, put the dress on, and then danced around, and you get it. You get the metaphor. You don't have to hit people over the head. We don't need to see the dress floating around with all these fancy trickeries. You just say she is being mesmerized and wooed by the dark side. And so we have this beautiful finale where Lily is there in her new, you know, dark princess look. She's given a weapon. She's going to sever the second unicorn's horn and plunge the world into complete darkness. Darkness is there, and he's like, well, of course I won. Look at me. You know, and you're not sure where Lily's loyalties lie. So Jack continues on, even though when, like, he's given a chance to, they're going to kill Lily. They're going to use a bow and arrow and take her out. He's like, wait, she's on our side. And all the faith of the world is hanging in the balance. And Lily cuts the chain holding the unicorn instead of the horn. So she was pretending she's not been seduced by the dark side. And Jack and his gang blast darkness with light. And the stage is set where he has to battle him, you know, one-on-one. And we get this great, you know, this Curry's performance just gets better and better. And finally he tells Cruz's character, like, I was here before you. Darkness was here before light. I am the right. And you are nothing. But in the end, you know, it's a fairy tale. And in the end of most fairy tales, good has to triumph over evil. And it's the one part of the film that's a little weird. It is very indicative of Alien, because Jack gets darkness pinned against this portal, and darkness can't hold on. And the last shot of is him sort of spiraling backwards into the cosmos. It looks a lot like the Alien spiraling into the cosmos, or Aliens, the Queen, which wasn't Scott, but was instead Cameron, but it's the same imagery. So, everything is put right. Nobody in the Earth, remembers that any of this happened. It was like time stood still for everybody. Lily was allowed to see it because he was wooing her to be his bride. Jack was allowed to see it because he was under the water at the time. So everything is really done beautifully in this movie. The production design is sumptuous. Every physical set is awe-inspiring. I'm not sure, having not seen I don't know if there's a making of on the Blu-ray, but I don't know how much was matte painting and how much was actual physical set, but everything in the film is handmade. Everything in the film is handcrafted. I don't care that sometimes you can see the limitations of the effects of the day, because these films were never meant to be shown in crystal clear Blu-ray technology. They were supposed to be shown on film with the haze that film has that hides a lot of that. So everything is forgiven. At the end, we find Lily and Jack together. Everything is set back the way it was. Jack finds the ring. He dives in and finds the ring finally, and I guess you're expected to believe that they lived happily ever after and that darkness was vanquished forever. But, if only there had been a sequel. If only there had been a sequel. But alas, it got overshadowed. And a movie this interesting and intricate and lovingly made has to wait and has to find its cult status. The same with Blade Runner. This was Ridley Scott's 80s career path. A misunderstood movie, gets butchered and botched at its release by the studio, and then finds its way on home video, DVD, Blu-ray, yada, 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 right? It wasn't until just a few years ago that we got a few legend items, all of Darkness, of course. They did I think McFarlane did one in its Movie Masters series, and then Nika did an 18-inch one. Just beautiful, beautiful. I'd love to get them, but the prices are really expensive. But when I worked at Spencer Gifts, one of the first things I put out was a Darkness mask on clearance. Might have been $20 or $30. Oh my God, I should have bought it. That beautiful red visage with those giant horns jutting out. Would have loved to have filled it with foam and hung it on the wall, right? Beautiful. I don't think I've ever seen anybody cosplay as Darkness. It's way too intricate, complicated, and uncomfortable a costume. Maybe a statue would do, but not a costume. But if you've not seen Legend, it's well worth checking out. It is a little slow, but that's indicative of films of that day. Before Michael Bay and McG assaulted us with edits and quick cuts and get-to-it filming, movies were allowed to breathe and grow on you, and Legend does that. It breathes and it grows and immerses you in that world before plunging everything. And it does, before plunging you into the darkness, but it does still follow the 30-60-30. That's just the nature of storytelling, the nature of fairy tales. It's well worth picking up and checking out if you haven't. I'm jealous if you've not seen it before. You get to experience it for the first time. It has a 91 Reasons favorite. Tim Curry. We could do a whole episode on the career of Tim Curry and how amazing Mr. Curry's filmography is. He is one of my favorite actors of all time. So I'd like to thank Patreon pledger Monique and Tim for supporting the show and picking such a great film to review. Tim worked on it. He was a producer on the film, so he knows all the intricacies of it. And it was great picking his brain and getting a lot of these stories firsthand. And I couldn't be more humbled. And I held the unicorn horn. I had the power of darkness in my hand. How cool is that? I'll have to see if he can bring the horn out for a picture so we can put it on the page and share it with everybody. But again, thank you to Tim and Monique for their Patreon pledge. We couldn't be more humbled that you want to support the show. If you'd like to pick a movie for me to review, you can go on patreon.com, Patreon. Search 91 Reasons. It's $35 to support the show, and you get to pick a movie. And I know I'm behind. I still owe Michael Bondi a review. He's already gave me 3 movies to pick from. Handel's already picked his July film, so I'll be reviewing that soon. I'm off to Comic-Con this week, so we'll be back next week with our Comic-Con wrap-up. 4 days of pop culture insanity, which is, as you know, right up my alley, because that's what I do. It's what I live and breathe, is pop culture. Tomorrow I'll be on Chris Gore's panel at 7 o'clock in the main hall. Just look up Podcrash. You can check it out on our page, the 91 Reasons page. If you're in Comic-Con, look for me. I'll be wearing my 91 Reasons vest. I have business cards to hand out trying to promote the show. What else? We're at Scare LA next month. That's fantastic. How great is that? 91 Reasons finally has live appearances. It's unbelievable. You can support the show on Patreon. If you don't have any money, that's fine too. Go on iTunes and leave us a review. Doesn't cost anything for a 5-star review. Tell us what you like about the show. Tell us what you don't like about the show. I don't know. Everything's relative. We're off to San Diego tomorrow for, like I said, 4 days. It's going to be fantastic. I cannot wait. Maybe I'll see somebody dressed as Legend. You never know. I don't know. Who knows? Hey, thanks for listening. I am Jeff Tucker. I am the voice, and the show you're listening to is 91 Reasons.
People I know, places I go, make me feel tongue-tied. And I could see how people look down there on the inside. Here's where the story ends.
Thanks for listening to 91 Reasons. Please subscribe and leave a review on iTunes. Find us on Facebook. Is anyone even still listening?
I hear a throat begging to be cut.
Are you so anxious to see blood flow?
As you are to drink it.